This podcast is brought to you by Funny Bone Broth. Funny Bone Broth sources bones locally from a farm just north of Toronto. They use organic vegetables, quality ingredients, and small batch production. It's low in fat, low in sodium, high in protein, and high in delicious flavor. Check them out at funnybonebroth.com.
In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos Podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Grant. The Argos drop another painful one, 21-18, to the Hamilton Tiger Cats. They finished the season 4-14 or 1-14 against teams not named the Ottawa Red Blacks. I think I prefer to look at it as 4-14. Why did this game feel so painful? We weren't, we're not going anywhere. There's no playoffs. There's nothing, the game didn't mean anything. And I guess maybe it always does anytime we play Hamilton. But man, I was crushed at the end of the game. I'm still emotionally recovering here as I sit down and start going through my notes. This was a heavy game emotionally, and I maybe that just speaks to the passion in this rivalry. But man, that didn't feel very good. And this is a team this year that has made us feel this way many, many times. And I guess you never really get desensitized to it. It was a good game. Like, take away that third quarter. This was an exciting game. Exciting is maybe better than good game. It wasn't a good game. This was an exciting game, third quarter aside. And oh my God, special teams. I'll talk about that more a bit later. Oh, I wish that wasn't a part of the game tonight. Special teams just absolutely crushed us today. But we'll cover that a bit later on. A lot of storylines coming into this one, mostly from Hamilton's side, and I don't really care about most of those. The only one I do care about is that Dane Evans was out and Hayden Moore was in. As a Bearcats fan, Moore was my guy. I had trouble watching him tonight in black and yellow. It made me feel better that he didn't, put up like 60 points on us or something like that. But yeah, it was hard to watch him in those colors. The more exciting story for Argos fans was that McLeod Bethel-Thompson was out. Nothing against him, but we got a chance to see a full half from Dakota Prukop and Michael O'Connor, who we saw last week, but it was really nice to actually see them get a full half, even though it didn't feel like that because we ran so few offensive plays. I think we had 43 offensive snaps. That's not including special teams plays. And, compared to like 62 that we had last week. So, yeah, it didn't feel like either quarterback really got a chance to get things going. And it didn't help that our offense was pretty choppy at times too. But yeah, not a lot of carries for the backs, not a lot of throws. Prukop only ended up throwing 9 balls in a half of play, and it's not like we were running the ball. But it was really exciting to watch the kids, and I'll get to them a bit later. And Armani Edwards had a chance to break that 1,000-yard barrier, which of course he did. And so that was another exciting reason to come into the game. And we knew we were going to be getting a lot of the younger guys in at different positions, seeing a couple of those guys on the O-line. We're going to see Olette again for another full game, although that didn't quite go as planned. And generally see if we could even do some more evaluating of our own coaching staff. So lots of stuff to watch for. So here's how the podcast is going to work today. On first down, I'll recap the game. Second down, we'll do some analysis, and especially with regards to the Argos quarterback play, I'm going to talk a lot about Prukop and O'Connor. On third down, we'll look at where we go from here. What do we do with our lives now? Of course, we'll still keep watching throughout the playoffs. It's painful, though, when the Argos aren't in, but we'll watch. We'll take CFL games any day. And, cheer against the Ticats every step of the way, and hopefully there aren't that many steps to that. And we'll also talk a little bit about player evaluation going forward, coaching evaluation going forward, what next week looks like for the Argos, or, how it typically looks for a CFL team when the season wraps up. And that's all coming up on today's podcast.
Offside.
Wait till you hear Red Cashin say first down.
That penalty is declined.
Here it comes.
First down!
Here it comes. First down, says Red Cashin.
The Argos got off to a really good start. I know the first drive, Argos got the ball. It was only 4 plays, but at least it wasn't 2. And Prukop was exciting out there. Even on his incomplete pass, he's scrambling all over the place. He ends up with a 9-yard run. He was exciting to watch tonight, and we saw a little bit of that on the first drive. We end up punting the ball away. Hamilton takes over, and a couple plays into their first series, Shaq Richardson makes a huge pick, completely Bates Moore, picks the ball. 89 yards later, it's a touchdown, pick six. This was a beautifully set up interception by Shaq Richardson. He used a strategy that I've only seen recently. I was lucky enough to be able to coach alongside Chris Aki a couple years ago. He had hurt his bicep, and he came to join our staff for a season. And one of the things he taught the DBs was, our sort of general philosophy is usually that if you're sending heat, or if you've got an inexperienced or quarterback that's uncomfortable in the pocket, generally we lean towards playing press, knowing that the QB doesn't want to wait around for a long time, or he's not going to have a long time because there's a blitz coming. And Aki came in, he said, that's fine, that works, but why don't you try this? And one of his strategies was that, something that he picked up in Montreal was that, you stand back at 10, 11, 12 yards, knowing that quarterback's looking to get the ball out quickly, knowing that maybe it's a young QB, as was the case here. And the young QB sees in his periphery that you've got this big cushion over there. But as a DB now, instead of taking any backpedal steps, you're planted firmly, simply ready to accelerate forwards. That's all. And as soon as you see that QB start to look over to his receiver, knowing that you've got that huge cushion, you go and attack. And, if it happens that the receiver gets far enough into his route, then obviously, you start into your back pedal and pick up the play as per the usual. But generally with that young QB, or if there's a ton of heat coming and you're standing at 10, 11, 12 yards, that ball is coming out. And if you're ready to fly forwards, you're going to make a play. And that's exactly what Shaq Richardson did here. 89-yard pick six. Argos are up 6-0. And it stayed 6-0 because we go and miss the extra point. This was not only did we miss the extra point, I thought it went through. I believe that the official had a much better view than any of us did. He's looking straight up at the ball, and so I have to believe that didn't go through, but man, it looked like it went through. And this, in the literary world, we would call this foreshadowing, because this wasn't the only time this happened, and man, was this going to be a rough night for field goals, extra points, all that stuff. I felt generally there were a few calls that were sort of a little ticky-tack. I don't know what you thought about that Justin Thomas unnecessary roughness call where he threw the back into the ground. I get that it looked very violent, but I didn't feel like he threw him after the whistle. Like he was in the process of throwing him, albeit like a rag doll, to the ground, but he was making a tackle, and it was a little bit. I guess it was a little bit after the whistle, but I think he started the motion, and it happened to look so violent. I think if that's a big fullback or something like that, I think that penalty doesn't get called. And then next time Hamilton gets the ball back, Darby gets a pick, and this one's called back on a ridiculous pass interference call on Richardson. He was on Ackland. And it looked to me, first of all, it's away from the play. Moore didn't even look at that side of the field. Not that doesn't mean it's not a penalty, but I think you often see that doesn't get called when a quarterback's just zeroed in completely on his left side. And this is a ticky-tack foul that was over on the right-hand side. Richardson stepped in front of Ackland, but he stepped in front because he knew where Ackland was going. Ackland had a dig route. Richardson stepped in front of it because if he had been going to Ackland, that's where the ball would have been, and Richardson would have made that pick again. And so he's anticipating that. He's entitled to that space. I thought that was a brutal penalty. Marshall ends up running in a TD. Of course, Darby doesn't get credit with the pick. Marshall runs in the TD. And we move on to the second quarter. We saw a little bit of trickery from Hamilton. The next time they got the ball back, they tried this onside punt, which you get to see in Canadian football. It's such a fun play. So they end up lining three guys up to the right onside, which means they're behind the guy that punts the ball. And if you haven't seen this play before, the rule is basically that in Canadian football, the punter is allowed to recover the football. And not only that, he doesn't need to give 5 yards to the player fielding the football. But that also applies to any eligible player standing behind the punter when he punts the ball. If you're standing behind him, you are onside too, and you can now go and recover that football, and you don't have to give that 5 yards. So that's what Hamilton did. It was well played by Ford. Like, he saw what was happening, recognized it, backed up. He was in perfect position. It's just then he got hit in the face as he was fielding that football. They end up not calling anything on that. They talked about it, decided that no, that was all cool, and Harilahu ends up kicking a field goal. A few plays later, it's 10-6 Hamilton. But we certainly feel like we're in this game. And then came the Rodney Smith TD, which was awesome. So Hamilton sends 5. Prukop dodges rushers. Looks like a 1980s football movie where guys are flying over the quarterback's head. Prukop stepping left, stepping right, fires a ball 50 yards in the air downfield, 74 yards in total, the touchdown to Rodney Smith. He looked really fast. I don't know what it is with the last couple of weeks, but Rodney Smith is on fire. It's unfortunate that the season has come to an end because he's playing as well as I've seen him play over these last few weeks. So he gets that touchdown, 13-10 Argos. We're looking good, but then Hamilton drives the ball back down the field. Marshall gets another touchdown, 11 yards on a draw play, which is pretty bold call from the 11-yard line. I didn't like the fact that Hamilton, I thought, had some really interesting play calling, and they weren't that conservative. I'll talk a bit more about that later in the analysis section too. But we ran draw plays on very traditional draw play downs, which I hate because, again, with a young quarterback, you're looking for stuff like that. So we ran a draw play to Ouellette. It was I feel like it was 2nd and 12 or something. And it ends up as like a 4-yard loss because you're looking for draws and screens. I love that aggressive call of a draw play down at the 11-yard line because you are thinking pass still, but it's not traditional draw or screen territory. So I think that was a pretty cool play call. And we got a little bit unlucky on that one. We had a stunt going on. Marshall ran through the B gap, and our backer that was there had just vacated that B gap on his stunt. He was coming around the edge. And so Marshall just waltzed through that hole that was left. Argos come back down the field. Medeiros field goal that goes through this time, ties it at 16. And then Lyndon Gaydosh had an interception, which was awesome. This is mostly on Gilchrist, who did a great job all night, just disrupting those passing lanes, getting into those windows, getting his arms up at the right time. And here he tipped a ball. It seemed to hit 3 or 4 different Argos. Lyndon Gaydosh comes down with it, which was nice for him. It was great to see him get a pick. And then we come back down the field. Medeiros misses again. And this field goal, I also felt it went through, and so did Medeiros. He went right afterwards, right after that kick, just like he did with that point after that he missed. He went right up to the officials. That ball went in. And I'm telling you, kickers have a really good sense of it. This is what they do. They know as soon as it hits their foot most times. This is in, this is not. You see kickers all the time. As soon as they kick it, they go to celebrate with their holder or not, if they know it's not there. And the only time they don't, and they're still sort of watching carefully, is because it's about to hit that post or something, because they have a really good feel for that ball. And with both that missed PAT and the missed field goal, Medeiros 100% thought those were through. It doesn't mean they were, but I think it's a pretty good indication. And then you watch them in slow motion. You should look them up. Take a look if you haven't seen them yet. I think the Argos had them on their Twitter account on the highlight package that they tweet out. I think they had both misses on there. But yeah, watch them carefully. And I swear it looks like both those balls go through. But again, part of your job is you don't make it that close. Don't kick it so that it's going directly over the upright. If you go right down the middle, then you don't have to worry about it. So third quarter now, Hamilton puts a great drive together, but then Darby, again, Moore just didn't see the free safety tonight. He had a really tough time finding Darby in particular, who made a ton of plays. There was no disguise here. It was just cover one. He was sitting there waiting and anticipated the throw, came in, picked the ball. Then a little later on in the third, it looks like Tremaine Washington's got a pick, but that gets wiped out by a roughing the passer call from Antigua, which again felt a little bit ticky-tack. It was, and I guess that's the game now. Like, you go back 3 or 4 years even, and that probably doesn't get called because it was really close to him releasing the football. But the days are gone of you having those 2 steps. Regardless of what the rules say, as soon as that quarterback releases the ball, you'd better get out of the way. You better make a full effort to avoid hitting that quarterback. This third quarter felt like a preseason game. All of the young guys that were in looked like young guys. O'Connor was doing fine, but he was game managing. He was, just doing what he had to do, short passes, not really taking any chances. And I felt like the same thing was going on the Hamilton side of the football, even though we were, making plays and getting picks. Willett got hurt late in the third, and that was really sad to see. He took a brutal shot. We'll see what that turns into. It looked to me like collarbone initially. I can't remember who it was that made that tackle. It was a really hard hit, and it was just helmet right to the collarbone. So you hate to see that. He's had 3 great games in a row, and it's not like this was a fantastic game that he was playing, but he played well. He was doing a nice job picking up blitzes. He was carrying the ball all right. He didn't get that many carries, but yeah, he was playing a good game, and he's just a fun player to watch, and another young guy that we've been paying attention to. So that was really sad to see his season come to an end that way. You'd like him to have been in there in the end. And then on to the fourth quarter, and then Gilchrist gets injured, another guy that was having a good game. We just couldn't keep guys healthy. They made a couple offensive line moves in the second half as well. We saw Shane Richards come into the game, and Maurice Simba as well. They both look good. The line actually I thought looked great in the second half. They were giving O'Connor a lot more time than they were giving Prukop. And I think it's a little easier to block for O'Connor. He's a bit more traditional, a pocket passer than Prukop, who scrambles around a lot more. But I don't really think that's what it was. Prukop was scrambling because he had to. The line was collapsing. But it was nice to see those 2 guys get in and have some production. And maybe the rest of the line decided they needed to step things up because they know that these 2 guys are battling for jobs. They're just getting film, trying to give themselves a place to play next year, or whether it's here or somewhere else. And so the whole line, I thought, for the Argos did a really nice job in the second half. So one of our drives is kept together by a roughing the kicker penalty. And it just felt like at that moment, because we've seen this before, we've seen it, we're usually on the other end of it, but you see that roughing the kicker penalty turns into a first down. We're getting down to the late stages of the fourth quarter. You just felt like this was the drive where we're going to pull it together. And then Gittins Jr. makes an amazing catch, great throw from O'Connor on the sideline, but it gets called back after they review it, OPI, which again I thought was marginal. It was OPI, but only just, and it's certainly not enough to call it watching it full speed. And even watching it in slow motion, I don't know. Technically, yes, it was, but really rough call, I thought, and especially with the stage of the game and everything that it was sort of building to. So we get the ball back. Hamilton ends up with a rouge. It is now 18-17 for Hamilton with 6:27 to play, and O'Connor gets his game face on and puts together an amazing drive all the way down to the Hamilton 15, and on comes the field goal unit with a 22-yard field goal attempt. And oh my God, Jimmy Ralph mishandles the snap. He caught the ball cleanly, but then when he went to put it down on the field goal tee, the puck, he placed the tip of the ball right on the very edge of the puck, and it slipped off, and it was basically lying horizontally. And it was Pfeffer was kicking the field goals. They had sent him in to kick the field goal here, and he didn't even get a fair shot at it. It's lying on its side, and And Pfeffer just like wires it out of the left corner of the end zone. At least we got a rouge. We barely got that on the play. It could very easily have hooked even further left and out of bounds. But we get the rouge. It's 18-18 with, I think, like 2:30, a little bit more than 2:30 to play in the game. And then Hamilton drives down the field, and there's like all sorts of crazy going on with just a few seconds left. So Hamilton's going for a field goal, but of course a rouge will win the game as well. So Toronto sends out their what's called a kick-out team. Your kick-out team, and this is something that's practiced during special teams time, where at the end of the game, last play of the game, if Hamilton, in theory, if they miss that field goal, you got to get that ball out of the end zone. And so usually you put a couple of sure-handed guys back there. Sometimes you put your punter back there as well, depending on exactly how much time's left. In this case, you're fine with basically skill guys that can at least kick it far enough to get the ball out of the end zone, where there wouldn't have been, because there wasn't enough time for there to be more plays. If there's like 30 seconds left, 40 seconds left, then that's when you need your punter back there too, because if you kick that ball back out of the end zone and out of bounds, they've got another shot. They can now turn around and kick a field goal. So you actually really want to boom it. But in this case, we're just in that theory, just looking to get it out of the end zone. But then Jermaine Gabriel goes down for no reason at all, seemingly. I think he just wanted to buy time for that kickout team to go over the situation and think clearly about what they were doing. I thought it was a savvy move on his part, maybe not the most sportsmanlike thing, but we see that happen in all leagues and all levels, things like that. So Gabriel goes down, buys them some time. They have a chance to discuss it, go over whose responsibility is what, because it's a pretty crucial play. But it was all for naught because the field goal was good, and Hamilton wins it 21-18.
Pass interference by the offense, number 80. 10-yard penalty, repeat second down.
I thought both young kids played really well. I thought they both played a lot better than their stats showed. At the end of the game, I think Prukop ended up going 4 of 9, 118 yards and a touchdown. Like 44% obviously doesn't sound very good, but we're only talking about 9 passes that he got to throw. So, it's not exactly what it looked like out there. I thought he looked a lot better than those stats. O'Connor, 10 of 16, 112 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, a much safer half. But he also had the benefit of much better offensive line play and a slightly less aggressive Hamilton defense. So I feel like just looking at the two of them, I felt like, I don't know, we're dealing with such a small sample size. We had one half today and a quarter last week, but I feel like at this point in their careers, Prukop is the better quarterback. And I actually think that Prukop might really be something. It's not enough information. We don't know enough yet, and that's unfortunate that this project didn't start a few weeks ago. Give us a little bit more time to assess things. And I'm not sure that would even have helped too much because we're talking about Ottawa twice, but I really want to see more of Dakota Prukop because I think he might be something special. He might be a guy that going forward really turns into something. O'Connor, I don't have enough of a sense of yet. He looks like he belongs, and I really hope he gets a shot next year. Whether hopefully it's with the Argos in some capacity, but just for his sake, and especially being a Canadian quarterback, I would love to see him get a shot somewhere. And I do think we've seen guys. We've seen other quarterbacks around the league. And we've seen enough Argo quarterbacks over the years just to know, this guy doesn't have it. And I've never felt that with Michael O'Connor. I think we need to see more of him, but I never got the sense of, man, this guy just doesn't belong out there. The play calling today was so conservative, and I hated to see that, especially with Prukop. Like, this is a guy that can move around. It's the last game of the season. You want to see what he can do. I would have called some more exotic plays. It was highly conservative. I hated those draw plays and short passes, the all hooks concepts that they kept going back to. I wanted to see him on the move a little bit more. I wanted to see those bootlegs and play action and have him rolling a lot more than he did. They did that a couple times, but most of it was him scrambling on his own. And maybe this comes down to the coaching staff maybe not trusting the O-line or or just not having enough time to get everything sorted. It's hard when you're preparing multiple quarterbacks over a few weeks. But yeah, that conservative play calling, I wanted to see him use his strengths more, and it didn't look like, whereas I felt last week, I thought the play calls were excellent. This week, I just didn't feel like they catered to, especially to Prukop's strengths. He's such an accurate passer. He's got a very good deep ball. I know he did have one underthrow today, but for the most part, he's got a great deep ball, and it's always on the money. I would love to have seen him scrambling out, threatening the Ticats by getting out to the edge and making a play downfield. And we never really got to see that. Prukop had a bit of trouble at times reading defenses, or maybe it was. I don't think it was reading the defense. I think it was more remembering to look at the entire field. There was an occasion, for example, where we had all hooks on his left side, and you could see pre-snap that this was going to be a cover 3 cut, and we were going to have our middle receiver in the trip side wide open on his curl, and that would have been the perfect throw at that time. It was like 2nd and 6 or something like that, and he just never got his eyes around to that side. Ended up with an incomplete pass to someone that was covered, and things like that where you just have to sort of think pre-snap. Okay, here's the defense that I see. I'm looking at a halfback that's going to be bailing, and I've got someone running a hook right in that spot, and it's 2nd down and 6, then that's sort of an automatic. And the only time you go away from that is if what you saw pre-snap doesn't turn into what you see post-snap. And in this case, Hamilton wasn't really disguising anything. They were playing a pretty base defense, a good defense, though, man. They actually, coming off of 2 weeks against Ottawa and 1 week with Montreal that was sort of only half into it. I know Hamilton wasn't playing for much, but this is a good team, and it pains me to say that, but yeah, this defense could fly, even with the guys that they had out there. So for them not disguising stuff as they were, especially, it shows you what a skilled defense this was. But yeah, there were a couple of those plays that I thought Prukop could have made. What a great job scrambling, though. The O-line, like I said, left him in a situation. There's so many times where you thought for sure the play was over, there was going to be a whistle, that he was sacked, and somehow he had this Houdini-like escape, ran around some more, got a throw downfield, and he made some amazing on-the-run throws. Of his 4 completions, I think 3 of them were like on full sprint, and I think all his completions were on adjustments that he had to make and shift around a little bit in the pocket. I would like to see him complete throws without that. Like, what could he have done with the kind of pocket that O'Connor had in the second half? Would he have, maybe? And I'm not necessarily saying he would have looked better than O'Connor did in the second half. I don't know, but we never really got to see that. And it would have been nice to see him back there, taking the snap, 3-step drop, fire the football. And I don't think we saw that once. The line was having trouble with the 3-man front that Hamilton kept going into. We haven't really played much in terms of like multiple front defenses over the last few weeks. And that 3-man where they kept sending 2 guys off the edge, especially early on, you see it in the first half a lot. They went away from that in the second half, and you saw a lot more 4-man lines. But that 3-man line in particular, where they sometimes did, sometimes didn't send those backers off the edge, was causing a lot of trouble for our O-line, and in turn causing problems for Prukop. O'Connor in his half, like I said before, did a really nice job of working with what he was given. He didn't really take any chances. The only chance he took was on that hitch and go down the sidelines to Gittins Jr. that ended up getting called back for the OPI. But aside from that throw, he didn't take a ton of risks. And part of that's from the play calling. Part of that's him, I'm sure, not wanting to make mistakes. He's trying to put some play on film, and throwing interceptions isn't a great way to get invited back. And next year's going to be tough with the change in the quarterback rules that we've got coming. So, he wants to make sure he gets a half of play without any mistakes. And I was so impressed at the end when he engineered that drive for what could have been and maybe should have been the game-winning field goal to take the team all the way down to the 15-yard line like that. The poise that he showed, he looked so calm and comfortable in the pocket. And I thought that was really something. So again, impressed with the two kids. I still think Prukop's the guy. And we got some tough decisions to make too, because it's not like McLeod Bethel Thompson didn't have a great year statistically. So, that's something to think about. Like, what is that going to look like next year? But I think a fun bet is putting some money on Dakota Prukop, because I do think I see something there.
Ball start. Offense. Everyone except the center. Third down.
So where do we go from here? So this is what next week is probably going to look like for the Toronto Argonauts, because this is pretty typical of CFL teams. The day after the season ends, the week after the season ends. So tomorrow, guys are going to go start cleaning out their lockers. Typically, every player goes through an exit interview with the coaching staff. Sometimes management gets involved as well. And then once that's all wrapped up, coaches go through exit interviews with management. And usually that culminates in a longer interview with the head coach. And then management sort of gets together and talks about, okay, what are we going to do here going forwards? So tomorrow what you'll probably see is, while guys are cleaning out their lockers, there'll be some press conferences. We'll hear probably hear about these plans. You'll have some exit interviews with guys that are leaving town right away, guys whose contracts are up. We usually have their exit interviews on locker cleanout day. Some guys that maybe have plans traveling back to the States might get their interviews tomorrow too. And then over the next day or two, you'll wrap up all the player exit interviews. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you're going to see those exit interviews with coaching staffs, assistant coaches, everyone from the big man on down. And that'll wrap up near the end of the week, where they sit down with Chamberlain and talk about what they see going forward, and probably ask for his reflection on the season. And this is not going to be an easy interview for the guy. Like I said, against non-Ottawa teams, we're talking about a 1-14 team, and Ottawa is one of the worst CFL teams we've seen in a long time. So there's not a lot to talk about in terms of positives coming away here. Now, this is not all on Chamberlain, and I think Pinball knows that. I think MLSE knows that. There was a lack of talent at a lot of different positions, but there are also other positions that were very talented. You got 3 receivers that were over 1,000 yards. Now, some of that is to do with the fact that you often have good passing numbers on bad teams, just simply because you stop running the ball. You're always trying to catch up. So some of that, I think that pertains a little bit to Bethel Thompson's numbers and having 3 receivers over 1,000 yards. You don't see that on every team, because not every team is down by 20 at the half, as the Argos sometimes found themselves this year. And so you have to chuck it around a little bit more. But I don't think, like Ottawa was in that same position, and they certainly don't have handfuls of guys with over 1,000 yards receiving and quarterbacks with great numbers. So I think there was something there in terms of the Argonauts offense. They need to fix the O-line. There's some holes that need to be patched on the O-line. And in the coming weeks, we'll talk a bit more about some of the replacements that need to be made more specifically, who's available, free agents that we can start looking at, guys that we may want to draft, guys that we may want to bring in, guys that we don't want to re-sign, and guys that we're maybe looking to move elsewhere. But I do think we need to rejig the O-line a little bit, because I think O-line aside, I feel like we've got all the pieces on this current offense that we need. I think there's enough there between Bethel Thompson and Prukop, and I think you can throw in O'Connor too, and I think there's a difficult decision that has to be made there at some point. I like the running backs. I like Ouellette. I love Wilder. Wilder, I consider one of the best backs in the league. He just didn't have the opportunities this year. I don't think he was 100% healthy either, and he really didn't have the blocking. But I love him as a player. And the receiving core, I think, is fantastic. So if you can clean up that offensive line, and some of it, I think you have to start looking at the coaching as well, and start looking at positional coaches and, units that struggled more. Is that a reflection of the talent that's here? Was there enough development that we saw from these units that we can say, yes, the coaches did everything they could, or was there maybe something lacking? So, that's something that we're going to have to figure out on the offensive side of the ball. But I don't think there are that many questions. On the defense, it was a much harder thing to read. I think certainly all positional groups are going to have to go through. There was some great play that we got from Shaq Richardson over the last few games. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Argos, try their best to keep him around. I thought Alden Darby had, aside from obviously he missed a little bit of time with injury, but he'd been playing really well in the last half of the season. I think there's enough to work with there in terms of the defensive backs. I feel like we do need to upgrade the defensive line a little bit, need to take a really good hard look at the linebacker spot too, because I think that's where we were getting picked apart. And you even saw that tonight where Hamilton pretty much ran at will. They had no trouble creating huge holes. And the defensive line, while I thought they pass rushed pretty well, they just couldn't seem to close down those holes. Guards were climbing up to the next level, taking out our linebackers, and no one was able to step in and make a play. And if you can't stop the run in the CFL, you're in a lot of trouble because it's almost nobody can stop the pass. So if you can't stop the run either, in this league, you're not going to be around long, or you're going to be 4-14. So I do think those are positions we need to look at for sure. Special teams, we definitely need to take a close look at our kicking game. I know we saw Krapina get hurt, but he was struggling, pretty much the second half of the season. He seemed to have lost a little something off his leg, and maybe there's an injury there that I don't know about, because again, this is a guy that we watched play in the OUA, and he had a strong leg and very accurate, but a number of times he just came up short on what felt like makeable field goals. And in this league, you need to be able to hit 50-yard field goals with some consistency. And he just wasn't able to do that. And then we saw Medeiros come in, and I felt bad for the guy because he's clearly got a case of the yips, which happens. It's something that, maybe you've gone through it putting. I'm not good enough a putter in golf to get the yips, but if you're a better player than I am, that's something that might have happened to you. And once it gets in your head, this sort of Chuck Knobloch syndrome, and you can't seem to shake it, you almost need a change of scenery. Because Medeiros, we saw him at Western, was a great kicker and someone that I felt was going to do a great job in the CFL. And he just doesn't look like himself the way that he's pulling stuff. And, didn't look like himself last week, didn't look like himself today. And so I think he needs a change of scenery if he's going to continue his career in the CFL. And so we got to make a call about Tyler Krapina. Again, another guy I like. I love when we get OUA guys, especially playing for the Argos. And so I'd hate to see a guy like that move along, but I think from a football standpoint, you got to take a really careful look at that. And then coaching staff, there are going to be some really difficult decisions. I'm interested to hear what they say tomorrow in some of the interviews that go on, because I think we'll probably get an indication early on as to whether or not we've got a number of coaches on the hot seat. I would love them to keep Coach Chapdelaine around. I think he's a really creative play caller. I think he's really creative in terms of the plays that he comes up with too. This is not a guy that sort of has his book and that's it. This is a guy that makes tweaks week to week. He's been around the game for so long, and he's got a history of success. I would love to see them keep him around, but a lot of that will hinge on whether or not they're keeping the head coach. Because if you don't keep the head coach, then nobody's job is safe. Because what I don't want is a situation where you're bringing in a new head coach, but saying, yes, you're the coach, but you can't quite assemble your staff because we want to keep this guy, and this guy. I believe that even though I like Coach Chapdelaine, if they let Coach Chamberlain go, whoever comes in should have the freedom to decide on every positional coach that they bring in to their staff. I think that's a really important thing. And too many times you see teams that are afraid to do that because they had a good positional coach. They don't want to let him go. And I think a lot of times that coach coming in, if they want to keep that guy, then that's great. And they have the option to. I'm not saying you just, you fire everybody without talking to the new guy coming in. I think you talk to them and say, we love this guy. He did some great work. What do you think about working with him? And if he says great, then awesome. And if not, he's got someone else in mind, then, I think it's important that you go with that. So that'll just about do it for tonight's post-game X's and Argos podcast. Again, stuff we've got coming up down the road. We're going to be continuing on with our podcasting program over the off season. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about, especially in the coming weeks as some of these decisions are made, some of these coaching decisions, some of the player decisions that we just talked about. And so stay tuned for those, as we'll be putting out at least a weekly podcast going forwards. And in the meantime, thanks so much for listening. Again, the final here tonight, 21-18, Hamilton over Toronto. Argos finished the season 4-14. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast if you haven't already done so. I'll see you next time.